last week we talked about birth order. Birth order is very important. I think it's very helpful. I think it's a lot of fun. It's insightful. But listen, tonight is way more powerful. It's way more important. I feel nervous saying important. It really is a tremendous thing for us to understand. And here's why. Because in the world that we live in, our kids are desperate for love. Okay? And the world is teaching them the opposite of what we want them to understand. The world is confusing them with sexuality, with the access to violence, with the fragmented families. I mean, the list goes on and on. And so if our kids, particularly our daughters, but if our kids don't understand and experience love from their parents, they will go find it elsewhere. Many of us, that might be our story, or at least a season of our life. Now, we went through that. We went looking other places to try to fill this void. And it's a dangerous place to be. And so this is helpful, it is insightful, but it is so important for us as parents. And so I'm really hopeful that today will be helpful. Now, this is interesting because we all crave different kinds of affection, different kinds of attention. So I know for Sarah and I, early on when we started dating, this is interesting. Her parents are here. They're going to hear this for the first time. Brace yourself. Brace yourself. So when Sarah and I were dating, we had been dating for a few months, and Christmas time came around. So I grew up with a lot of gifts. That's what we did. Gifts were kind of our thing. So for Christmas, I got her, have you ever seen one of those, you know, you have your little present bags, your gift bags, and then you have a gift bag, and then you have a real bag, right? You know what I'm talking about? The big old gift bag that you could just keep stuffing things in there. Well, I did that for Christmas. All right, you remember this? Okay, I'm not lying. I was hoping it wasn't a dream. All right, so I remember just buying all of these things because I wanted her to know how much I cared about her. So I was buying sometimes expensive things, sometimes little things, just stuffing it all in this bag. So I remember the night that I gave it to her, you know, she was so thankful. And then she said, but I can't take this home. I don't know how my parents are going to react to you having gotten me all these gifts. And I remember thinking, how could you not like me? Are you kidding me? I went above and beyond to buy you all of these gifts. Well, the truth is, for Sarah, it mattered, but it didn't really matter that much. And here's why. Because her love language is not gifts. Her love language is words of affirmation. And so it's crazy now to think about, I could write a note to her that cost me $0 and it have more influence in her life than spending $1,000. I don't know if I've ever actually done that. $1,000 on some piece of jewelry. I mean, you would think you make the investment and you picked it out and you hand that gift, and to her, she's grateful. Don't get me wrong, never has not been. But if I were to write her a note, which feels criminal to me because I'm a gifts guy. Don't write me a note. I don't want a note. I want a gift, right? It's two different worlds. But when we understand each other's love languages, and even with our kids, it helps us to access love better and to share love better. And really, if you think about this whole love language concept comes from Dr. Gary Chapman, by the way. He started with the 5 Love Languages book, and now he's spun off on parents. He's got teens, he's got children, he's got all kinds of spin-offs. I highly recommend digging into some of that, and we'll just cover a brief scope of it. But one of the things that he talks about is making sure we understand that all of us have, if you will, this emotional kind of love tank. That we want that love tank to be full so that we're not trying to fill it with other things. That's very powerful when we talk about parents and kids. We don't want our kids trying to find love in all the wrong places because we as parents didn't do the best job helping to fill their love tank. And that would extend into marriage as well, obviously, but we're going to focus on kids tonight. And so this is essentially what the 5 languages are. We all express and experience love in the same 5 ways, but there's one more important than the other. Now, let's make this note very important. Just because you're going to discover tonight the love language that's most influential for you, your spouse, and for your kids, it doesn't mean that you get to neglect the other 4. The other 4 are still very, very important, and Dr. Chapman's very, very important to say this. He always wants us to be clear that you can't neglect the others, But now you understand that there is one that will have a much bigger effect and by essence becomes much more important. So we have to know what that is, but this isn't a pass to just neglect all the others. Okay, that's a little note, but it's very important to understand as we dive in. Now, to identify your child, your spouse's, your coworkers' love language, let's put that slide back up really quick. We had this up here earlier. So sometimes we don't always get to take a quiz, or we don't always get to give a quiz to our kids. So for Sarah and I, we're trying to figure out our youngsters' love language, but we can't ask them these questions. We have to answer for them. So this really helps us get a better gauge when we have limited resources. Another way to use this would be for coworkers. Understanding how some of your coworkers, people that work for you in particular, operate can be very, very helpful, right? And so this is a way that you could kind of assess people around you without them having to take the quiz, but also understand it's going to be limited by what you can see and what you do know. So keep that in mind. But I found this to be tremendously helpful. So we'll post that online later so you can have it, or if you want to take a picture real quick, highly encourage that. Okay, so let's jump in. The 5 love languages, and again, we're focusing on our kiddos. We're focusing on our kiddos. Here's the first one. Let's talk about physical touch. Physical touch. These are words you might hear, things like cuddle me, chase me. A hug might say I love you to some, but it shouts I love you to physical touch children. All right, so one kid, you just come up, you give them a hug, and they're like, oh, great, I'm out. The other kid, you give them a hug, and man, their world just lit up because that's how God has wired them to receive love. It is the most influential. If your kids are constantly in your space, touching you, or playing with your hair, it's not to annoy you, though it might, I understand. It's because they probably are physical touch kids, and so they desire that kind of interaction, and if they don't get it from you, they're going to start trying to initiate it with you. So it's helpful to understand this. Now let's talk about some ways we can express love to physical touch kids. Now we could create a long list for all of these, so I'm just going to give you a couple of thoughts that you can think about. Here's the first one. You might consider snuggling on the couch with your kid and ask them to come sit in your lap. All right, cozy up on the couch, ask them to sit in your lap. If your kid's 23, might be weird, but decipher as you need. Another thought, especially for young kids, wrestling with your kids or playing sports that require jostling, right? This is a way that they interact. So you may notice that your boys, right? Boys are always kind of aggressive, but physical touch kids, they really like to house play, rough play, really because they're getting to engage. They're getting to touch and interact. And so these kinds of things really excite them. Another way you could do it is maybe having some form of a secret handshake or a secret symbol, something that you could use in big emotion moments where your kid could know that you love them, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a big old scooping hug, maybe an intense situation. So those are a couple of ideas on ways that we can express love, but here's some things we want to look out for. Here's some common pitfalls. Slapping or spanking a physical touch kid can be devastating. Okay, now listen, this isn't a do we spank or do we not spank debate. Okay, that kind of flies out the window when we talk about this one particular setup for children. If your child is a physical touch kid, think about it. They receive love most by touching and interacting. So by default, when we were to spank them, it sends the opposite message and it hits them in a way that it might not your other children. So for instance, you could spank one kid and he or she is like, oh, okay, I won't do it again. You spank another kid that's physical touch, and you'll notice pretty quickly that it just devastates them much deeper than the other. That's worth noting. Doesn't mean you can't discipline your kid, but you might want to come up with some more creative ways to do that. Why? Because our job as parents is to make sure that our children are loved and disciplined, loved and taught, loved and modeled. And so it's very, very important that you at least take that as a note. Now, we're not telling you what to do. Of course, that we will always defer to you when it's your children. But that is something to know when physical touch kids are spanked. It really can be devastating. Here's another pitfall. As kids, particularly girls and dads get older, affection tends to drop. It makes sense. As your kid gets older, you're probably not inviting your daughter to sit in your lap, right? There's a moment where things just become kind of weird. So what happens, though, by default is dads, we pull away so much that sometimes we can miss out on opportunities. And so making hugs with your kids is pretty much the most common practice that can be carried on all the way through their years. I know that Sarah and her dad still hug, and I know she loves every moment of it. And so there are ways that we can continue that interaction, but also acknowledge that it does change a little bit as age. But for dads, especially with your daughters, listen, as best as you can, with physical touch daughters, you've got to keep them close. Because if you don't, they will go looking for that elsewhere. And it usually ends up in a devastating situation. Okay, let's talk about gifts. Gifts. So they might be saying things like, presents, please. I love gifts. Gifts are so cool. That's not a hint. Christmas is around the corner. Children who feel loved when they receive things aren't just pandering for more stuff. Sometimes we go, oh, gifts, kids. They just want more stuff. Of course they're gifts, kids. They get presents every time, right? But think about it. It's not just about giving a present. It's about how the present was wrapped, who the present came from, and what the present was. Giving them a present that's just something they want does not have the same effect as giving them something that is either encouraging for them, helpful for them, or something that was so out of ordinary or so out of the blue that it was thoughtful. You'll notice with gift kids, they even pay attention to how a present is wrapped. They will notice the detail. For me, I was never that kid. In fact, I got mad when it was complicated because I just wanted to get in there. But for gifts kids, they approach it differently. They will kind of hoard the gifts a little bit. They'll watch those gifts. At Christmas, they probably love Christmas time. If you have presents under the tree or something like that, they're just watching because they're wired in this way to receive love. Now, one thing to note, though, this doesn't mean we just go spend a ton of money all the time. That's not reasonable for any of us. What it would look like is maybe we save up some dollar store presents in a closet or something, and periodically we can pull one out of the blue and just, I just want you to know I love you so much. It doesn't have to be big or expensive. It's thoughtful. It may not even be something you buy. It could be something like maybe you make, I don't do origami, but this was recommended. Maybe you make some kind of an origami figure and put it on their pillow. Or maybe for your daughter, you put a sunflower in her hair when you're doing her hair. It's little things like that. They don't have to be expensive, but the impact on their hearts and on their emotional love tank is so special. Now, here's some things, though, that we want to be careful of. We don't want to overdo giving, okay? We got to give gifts that are age appropriate and that are helpful and not just once. If you give too much, it loses some of its effect. And so it's about being wise. It's about being thoughtful, but at the same time being cautious that you don't go too far. We also want to make sure that we don't shower them with gifts and neglect the other love languages. So this is for all of them, but particularly with gifts. It's easy to just go, oh, here's a gift. Okay, here's a gift. But you don't give them words of affirmation. You don't give them physical touch because you're just leaning to the thing you know has the most effect. We see this a lot when we talk about fragmented families that have gone through divorce, even through remarriage. What often happens is the divorced parent or the single parent in that season will overwhelm their kid with gifts because they're trying to make up for what they've gone through. And that could still be carrying over for those of you that are now remarried. Something to note. This isn't a get out of a jail card. This isn't an easy way to just get your kid happy and get them out of the way. It has to be thoughtful and intentional and impactful. But if you will do that, it will be tremendously helpful. When your kids get older, something to think about is letting them be a part of picking out those gifts. So don't just always go do it for them. As they get older, kind of bring them in a little bit. Let them see why you're doing this. It's because you truly do care and you want them to know how much you love them. And so as they get older, that's a way that you can help kind of bring them in. For the younger kids, stickers and star charts are huge, right? Little kids, some of you already know this as parents, as teachers. Yeah, you use the stickers and the stars all over. Some of them, it's more impactful than others. It's probably gifts kids that really appreciate that opportunity for a reward or for some kind of a gift. One other note, pitfall to look out for. When they give you something, when you receive something from a gifts kid, how you respond is really important. It really needs to be a big deal. Wow, thank you so much. I'll never forget when Kyla started coming home from church with, that stuff that they always give them every single Sunday. Yes, I work here. Yes, I'm saying this. I remember it was one of the early days when they started bringing stuff home, and she went down for a nap, and I did what any normal parent does. She's done with this, put it up, dropped it in the trash. Didn't think about she might go throw something away herself, and I kid you not, that afternoon she opened up the trash, threw something away, and she lost it on me because Dad threw away her artwork from church, okay? Don't judge me. You get your judgmental eyes back on you. We've all done it. But it's so interesting because even though I don't really think Kyla, well, is Kyla a gifts kid? Did we get to? She is gifts kid. There you go. All right. I'm a terrible parent. You understand now. See, we're all imperfect, all right? We're all learning together. But that's something you want to really look out for. When a gifts kid gives you something, you want to definitely respond a little bit extra so they know how much it means to you, because that's their native tongue. That's them trying to show you love by how they receive it, because naturally we will always give what we choose to receive. That's typically how it goes. Okay, let's look at words of affirmation. Number 3. This might be the, hey, come talk with me. For kids who listen intently and speak sweetly, your loving words matter most. So words of affirmation, kids, what you say and how you say it is tremendously important. So if your kid beams whenever you praise him or her or offers you sweet feedback, it's probably a good indication that you have a kid that's wired for words of affirmation. So here's some ways we can express love. Little notes in her lunchbox. That's a good one. That's a good one no matter what, but especially if you have a words of affirmation kid. It also works if your wife is a words of affirmation person. And I'll tell you after I try it. Now I just blew it because she's here and she knows what I'm going to try next. That's okay. We also want to be very specific when we point out characteristics. So sometimes we just say, hey, you're awesome. And sometimes it's, hey, I want you to know Kyla or Johnny or Jason or whatever your kid's name is. You're awesome because. Here's why. When we get specific, the impact has a greater weight. Another fun thing you could try, I haven't tried this yet, but you could gossip to a stuffed animal, especially for the little kids. Gossip to a stuffed animal and let them overhear you talking about how great they are, right? Try that at home. Let me know how it goes. I like that recommendation. And another one is to get down on your child's level, eye to eye. You are so special to me. So something that Sarah and I do, we tell Kyla she's our favorite daughter. Yeah, some of you can't do that because you have multiple, and it's a whole other set of counseling we're going to have to go through years later. But for us, we just have one boy and one girl, so we get to say, you're my favorite daughter, you're my favorite son. And we used to say it as a joke, and now really it's something we want them to hear over and over, and we've been blessed to only have 2, and so we can get away with that. Be careful if you try that at home, depending on your situation. Now, here's some pitfalls we want to be careful of. Insults cut extra deep to words of affirmation, kids. Sarcasm. Sarcasm is another one. Look, and I hate talking about sarcasm because that's me. I am very sarcastic. It's how I'm funny, and it's also how I make terrible mistakes. If you didn't know this, sarcasm, the word actually comes from the root meaning basically means to tear flesh. That's what sarcasm is translated to. And that's exactly what it does. Now, some of the funniest people you'll meet are the sarcastic ones. And sometimes that's you, and it's me. Man, we can make people laugh, and we can cut up, but I tell you what, for a words of affirmation kid, sarcasm is just destructive. I'll never forget, I wasn't planning to say this. I used to give some tennis lessons back in the day, and there was a little girl that I used to give lessons to. And I remember her, we would just play tennis, and then in between we'd talk a little bit. She was just starting high school, kind of what's going on, da-da-da. And I remember she said, I really enjoy being out here with you because you don't use sarcasm. And I remember thinking, totally right, yep, 100%, right here. And but she said, all the other people that were pouring into her life, I'll kind of leave who those people were, but the people pouring into her life, they always had fun with her, but they were always sarcastic. And she always felt so cut down. They never knew it, but she always felt so cut down. And I remember when she said that to me, I thought, that's a comment that should change my life forever. And I got to be honest, I still struggle with sarcasm to this day. But I never forgot that comment. It was so subtle. And it was it wasn't something that we tried to breathe. It just came out. And that just reminds you of how powerful our words can be. And with words of affirmation, kid, you have got to be so, so careful. Research tells us that you should, for words of affirmation, kids, give your kids a compliment 3 times a day minimum. Now, that's hard, okay? Let's just be honest. That's really hard. But that's how important words of affirmation are, especially to our kids who are developing right in front of our eyes. So maybe that's a little goal you could aim for. One other thing is to always let your I love yous stand alone. Don't ever do the I love you, but da-da-da-da. Because what that implies to a words of affirmation kid is that your love is conditional. Right? And we don't ever want our kids to feel like our love is conditional. Now, let's be honest. We're all imperfect, okay? Some of you are like, I don't do any of this. I am a terrible parent. No, we're all learning, and we're all growing together. But, man, these things are so, so important. Acts of service. Just two more. These kids appreciate thoughtful gestures, though it may seem the oddest of all. So acts of service is interesting. It's the idea of, hey, you do it for me. And you look at them and you go, who do you think I am? I'm the parent, you're the kid, you go do it. But the truth is, acts of service kids, they feel most loved when you walk alongside them while doing an activity, maybe even homework. Not just saying, hey, be sure you get that done, you're on problem 5, but actually step by step helping them to walk through it. That's when they feel loved. Or for an older kid, maybe you show up and you say, hey, you know what? You were supposed to take the trash out this morning, but I already did it for you. I just want you to know I love you. Now, don't let them tell you that's how they need to show love to you every day. Don't do that. But that one little thing right there, because they're an acts of service kid, man, you just lit up their world because you came alongside and you helped them. You did something for them. Now, it can get a little odd because it can feel, if you're not careful, like you're getting taken advantage of, and that would be one of the first things to look out for. You don't want to fall into a place where you end up picking up your kids' laundry 9 days in a row, and then you realize you're not showing love anymore. They just got you, all right? They got you. And they're laughing with love, but they're laughing, all right? So there's a balance like with all of these, but with acts of service, it's okay to step outside of the box a little bit for what you may do for your other kids. So maybe it's cold, like today, and you wake up early for maybe a younger kid or maybe even a teenager. You grab their clothes and you throw it in the dryer so it warms them up for them. They get out of bed, you go, hey, I warmed your clothes. They're in the dryer. Go grab them so you can stay warm. An acts of service kid, they're going to fall over, have a heart attack. They're going to be so excited. Gifts kid probably doesn't care. Probably mad you made them walk to the dryer. But an acts of service kid will just feel that to their core because mom or dad, gosh, they love me so much. They did this for me. And so these are the kind of things we want to look for. One other thing is, when we talked about homework, I just said it quickly, but when it comes to homework, and I know it's all different, we're all in different stages, but these acts of service kids, they really like you to help them one step at a time. They want to feel like you're there with them. And sometimes we can go too far, and so you got to have that balance there, but your kid feeling like you're there with them, doing it with them, not just present, but doing it with them, that's what helps them feel loved. And so as they get older, you have to be more creative, but very, very important. Now, last one, quality time. Oh, quality time. Come here, Dad. Look at this, Mom. Spending time with this child is when they feel most valued and most loved. So if your kid is constantly saying things like, watch this or play with me, begging for attention, they are most likely a quality time kid. Here's some ways to express love. In addition to just being together, offer truly undivided attention to your child. Okay, big difference from just being in the same room. Some of you that are this, you understand. Being in the same room versus eye-to-eye talking, right? So, for instance, if you say, well, my kid was in the room with me while I was watching football, we're spending quality time together. No. Your quality time in their eyes is with that football player, which is weird, okay? They are sitting there alone, even if they're sitting right next to you. Now, sometimes just being present in a room can be enough for your kids, and so we don't want to belittle that. It's possible they may be playing with toys, and you're just there present with them, and they feel it. But also, we have to be careful because we got these things that are causing a lot of problems in our life. Anybody know what they are? They're called screens, all right? It ain't even phones anymore. It's whatever kind of screen you can get your hands on, even the TV screen. And listen, our kids feel it. Our kids are paying the price, but kids that desire quality time, they feel it even more. Look, I'm a football guy. I can watch football all day long. I don't because I have a wife, and she'd kill me. But if I watch football every day, all day long, she gives me Sunday. I'll give her that. But if I did that every day, it would be a massive problem, right? But if my kids are quality time, it's a devastating problem. You see the difference? It is devastating because they desire for dad to be eye to eye with me. I want to know that my daddy loves me, even if they're 23. I want to know that. And when they don't experience quality time, it cuts them to the core. And we got a problem because we're being wired. All of us, I don't care how old you are in this room, we're all being wired this way. We are watching everything fall apart in front of us because of our screens. It's a dangerous place to be. Now, we don't need to change the world. I'm not even trying to change your life. I just want to change what happens with you and your kiddos. If we can get there, man, we can make some massive steps forward. And so these quality time children, gosh, they desire so much for our attention, and it's eye to eye. If you have younger kids, it may be before you, or as you lay them in bed, you may just kind of get in bed with them and kind of head to head and just have some conversations with them. Just letting them know, no, it's just you and me. We're just talking. If you have multiple kids, most of us here do, multiple kids, you got to learn how to kind of balance that time, but recognize that if you had to choose, your quality time kid should get the time. And if you're at a store, by the way, and you got to buy something and you can only buy one thing, give it to the gifts kids. The other ones will get over it, okay? So just be practical sometimes, all right? Sometimes you got $1 and that's all you can do, and so you'll be fine. Here you go. Love you. We'll hang out when we get home. I mean, but it's okay if we understand what operates best, we can really be effective. And here's some pitfalls just really quickly. Now listen carefully, this is important. Putting quality time kids in a room by themselves in timeout can be more devastating than it is for other kids. For other kids, that's a very helpful, practical way to teach your kids something. But for quality time kids, the thing they crave most is being with you. And so when we isolate them, it can be more devastating. Again, not trying to tell you shouldn't do that or you can't do that, but I am warning you that research says that it is more problematic for quality time kids. We should note that. We might consider maybe a new strategy, especially for younger kids, on how we could discipline them if we have a quality time kid. And then another note here is kids, and this could be teenagers too, not realizing that a child acting out may be a desire for more attention and affection. That's a common pitfall. We just say, oh, there's being a teenager. And now that could be true, okay, because that is real. All of our kids are going to make mistakes. Even if we love them well, they're still going to be imperfect. But if you have a kid that's constantly acting out, it may very well be they're not getting the attention they feel like they need, and so they're trying to get it by acting out to get other attention. Does that make sense? And I'm sure if you're a teacher in here, you see this all the time, and it's tough. Now, a couple of just cautions as we close. A child's preference may change as time goes on. So your 7-year-old maybe enjoys, or let's say your toddler just enjoys snuggling, right? Laying on the couch with you. Don't you love those days? Those are my favorite days. And then they start running around. And now they want to horseplay with you. They just want to run around the house. They want to wrestle with you and throw you on the ground. They don't stand a chance, but they want to throw you on the ground. Because it's the same deal. It just looks a little bit different. So as parents, we want to be aware of that. And as our kids get older, things obviously begin to adapt. But the other thing I want to note is how we grow up really affects this. Our environment growing up really affects this. And so let's go back to the gifts thing. For years, I thought I was a gifts kid. I really did. But I realized something. I'm not a gifts kid. My love language is not gifts. I became a gifts kid. You know why? Because when I grew up, at Christmas, my mom, I don't know if this is weird, but it was like our tree just threw up with presents. They were everywhere, okay? And some of you grew up in homes like that. We opened up present after present after present after present. And then we took halftime, we ate breakfast, and then we kept going. And it wasn't even that we had a lot of money. It wasn't that way at all. But I think that's her love language, and so she incorporated that into our life. So for years, every Christmas, we took hours to open up presents, and we took our time. We separated them all out. We did all that. And so I developed that desire. I enjoyed doing that because I grew up that way. But I realized that that's not actually the best way for me to receive love. And so sometimes our environment affects a little bit of this. And so those are things to just kind of keep a note of, especially for you and I on a more personal level. Now, I think the one thing that I should have started with, but I decided to save this for the end, is, when we talk about love, all this stuff we're talking about is so real, okay? But none of us you and your kids, neither of us will ever fully feel love until we understand God's love. Okay, you just can't. It's absolutely impossible. We can have moments where we do better or we do well or we showed this little thing, but without God, you will not ever fully understand love. And neither will your kids. In fact, think about this, especially for you with younger kids, but even your teenagers. If you love them well, you will show them what God has for them. You will model for them what God. When I did singles ministry for years here, and I'm telling you, the broken families jacked up love more than anything else. So many of them had never seen love, and then when we try to tell them, hey, God loves you. God loves you so much. They look at it and go, yeah, right? How's that even possible? That makes no sense to me because they never saw it for themselves. And so as parents, we have the opportunity, responsibility, and obligation to love our kids well for the sole purpose of them seeing who God is to them. So they could know that this love of a heavenly Father in God is real and that they need it because they will never be fulfilled. We can help protect them, especially our daughters. We can help, but until they find that fulfillment in God, there will always be a void. In fact, God speaks to us with love languages as well. This whole thing, yes, Dr. Gary Chapman came up with it. He discovered it, but he didn't create this. God created this. God said, I'm going to wire everyone differently. And I want each other to understand that so they can love each other well. But I'm going to give some variety out there. And then he extends it out to us. Words of affirmation. What do you think this book is? This book is his way of speaking to you. And I'm a student of this book. I love teaching the Bible. Here's fun. It's unique. It's different. It's not exactly my normal style of teaching. But for the last 10 years, I've been teaching this book on a weekly basis. And I'm telling you, my favorite times are when I am saturated in this book. And I think it's because I'm a little bit more of a words of affirmation person than I realized. Because when the Heavenly Father is speaking to me, I feel it. Our God's a gifts God. When I met Sarah, when I had our kids, I didn't hold Sarah when I met her. That would be weird. But when I held my kids, just thinking, what a gift. God gave me this. And then you have a second one. Anybody have this? And you go, there's no way I could love another kid like I love my first one. I don't know how this is possible. Then you have a second one. You go, it's possible. It's crazy. This is how God can love everyone because he showed us how to do it within ourselves. And so we have these things, and I do believe, without a doubt, that without the love of God, man, we're going to miss it. And I'll tell you, the greatest gift he ever extended to you and I, what do you think it was? Jesus Christ. What did he say? John 3:16, for God so, what? Loved the world that he, what? Gave his only son. That sounds like the greatest gift you could ever. Listen, that our God created this for you and I to operate well together, but more importantly, to fully understand who he is. And you and I get to teach our kids that, and I hope you will take the mantle of that and live up best we can. Never going to be perfect, but I hope you'll live up to that because we have an unbelievable opportunity. Even if your kids are older, it's not too